Welcome back to Mineral Art Maestros, the podcast where art and minerals collide. I'm your host, Rebecca Johnston, and today we've got a real treat for you. We're sitting down with none other than Fred Wilda and Helen Rodak, a powerhouse pair in the mineral art world. Fred, a master artist whose works have captured the dazzling beauty of minerals since the 90s, joins us alongside Helen, his incredible partner, who keeps the creative wheels turning by managing the business side of things. Together, they've built a legacy of stunning artwork and community contributions. From Fred's artistic journey and mineral inspirations to Helen's behind-the-scenes magic, this conversation is packed with stories, insights, and passion that you will not want to miss. So get ready to learn about Fred's painting process, hear stories about their favorite mineral pieces, and discover their experiences in the field, and maybe even some tips for budding artists and collectors. And if you love art and minerals or both, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Mineral Art Maestros, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss an episode. Welcome, Fred and Helen. We are so glad you could join us today. How are you?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So excited.
Here today.
Wonderful. Well, we're very happy you could join us, and we are very excited to hear all about your artwork and your collaboration. And I just kind of wanted to start with how your interest in art began, and what are some of your earliest inspirations, Fred?
Well, I started art actually at a very, very young age. I remember thoughts of when I was probably 5 or 6 years old in my coloring book. That's the only thing I remember from the past experience from long, long ago. And I was just obsessed with coloring, being able to do something to create a picture, even if it was as simple as coloring. As time went by, I got into some pencil drawings and just having a good time doing drawings whenever I could. My first serious painting, or a picture, I should say, because it wasn't a painting, it was a pen and ink. I used India ink and a pen point that I had from school and created a pen and ink drawing. Took quite a while. I created it from scratch. It was nothing I was sitting and looking at, that's for sure. But I just thought I would do something different, something I could create. I was pretty happy with the results, and obviously we hung it up and framed it. Framed it and hung it up, and found it years later now. That's why it still exists here. My first painting, though, was a little different. I was pretty young, I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 years old, and I wanted to do a painting of something, so I decided to do a red sailboat on a blue sea with a blue sky and white clouds. And I used house paints, which back then were enamels, on a box cover from a department store because paper wouldn't work very well, it would wrinkle. And
Right.
So I tried a box cover and it worked perfect. I wish I had kept that. The painting disappeared many years ago, but that was my first attempt at a painting. Everything was pretty crude, but I was so pleased that I created something that people recognized. From there, I went into painting. Some drawings, pencil drawings, ink drawings, automobiles, antique automobiles I drew, I sketched. I had an uncle that took an interest in my work, and every once in a while would buy something from me for $2 or $3 or $5. He'd be extremely happy that somebody was willing to pay for my art. That's such
Yeah.
And so at Christmas one year, he bought me a set of oil paints, a starter set, and 3 canvas boards, small ones. And I did my first actual paintings on site. And the first one was a barn bridge. And I sat there, sketched it out right on the canvas board, and then did the painting of the barn bridge. Followed that painting up later with old mill that was in Hadley, and then did a third painting, which was a mill in North Hadley Pond. And all 3 of them were done in about the same style you see it in the barn bridge painting. And so that was my first attempt with oils, and I was pretty pleased with what happened. And people were surprised at the artwork I did, and so was I, actually. I kept painting in between, um, but no serious paintings. I was in school. We were very busy with school and working. I lived on a farm all my life and was brought up on a farm. So we had a lot of chores to do besides. So that left me with a little time to paint. And but when I got to high school, I had an art teacher that her name was Mrs. Utley, Florence Utley. And she said, Fred, I see all the drawings you've done on my book covers. I would off the book cover they gave me, and I put a plain book cover on that I would make myself so I could do painting sketches and drawings on it. And everywhere I went, I was anything I could draw on, including my jeans at times. I had covered with drawings with ballpoint pens and stuff. So I was obsessed with art at a very young age.
You could sell those now, Fred, those jeans.
I wish I had them.
You could make some now, they'd sell.
Right in style.
But Mrs. Utley also took a liking to my work. And I was in a shop class, and I was headed to be a carpenter. I loved building things with my hands, creating things. And so I was headed in that direction, professional wise. And my father was kind of pushing me in that direction. I guess back then, art was not something that you did for a profession in our culture. It was something you did for a hobby. But I continued doing it. She decided at one point that I should enter a competition put on by the Boston School of Fine Arts. It was for schools in Massachusetts, students that had talent. You could do a piece of work and submit it. And if you were picked, I think there were 30 people picked, 24 to 30 people picked from the state. And we would attend classes on Saturdays for 6 weeks in Boston. The drawing I created from my mind because I always wanted to build a cabin next to a river in the woods. So you see the painting that I created there. The top right left-hand corner of it is damaged, but that was because of where it was stored for a number of years in an attic, and a piece of it came off. We decided to frame it in and keep it preserved. So we managed to preserve that from 1958. I did get picked, and I did attend the 6 classes. She also, without me knowing it, she also got me accepted to an art school. I believe it was called the Swain School of Design, and I think it was in Rhode Island or somewhere in that neighborhood. Maybe it was in Massachusetts near Rhode Island. Anyway, they accepted 35 students a year, and all students were taught by professional artists, not by professors, people that have been in the business for many, many years and made careers. So I was excited about going, but that wasn't going to be an option for me because I didn't have the money. My parents didn't have the money. There was no such thing as taking loans for school back then. No option, at least not in our house. And I understood that. I wasn't upset about it. But I decided then and there that I was going to become the best artist that I could, regardless if I had school or not. So what happened when I was a senior, I still had her class then. A job came up 3 weeks before graduation in a department store in Northampton for an artist in the advertising department. And they were looking, obviously, for somebody young, high school age. And she talked me into interviewing. I interviewed, but they wanted somebody to start then. They couldn't wait 3 weeks. So she actually talked to my principal and to the superintendent and to my art teacher, or she was my art teacher. She talked to them, and believe it or not, they okayed my release from school for 3 weeks, last 3 weeks of school. so I could start my job.
Wow. That's one way to plunge into a career.
Well, uh, she was very dedicated to my work, and I was at that point committed to being an artist. Uh,
Yeah.
so it was great to have her as a teacher and get to that point. Um, and I took the job in the department store. It lasted about a year and a half when another job came up. But during that point in time, I learned quite a bit about doing different types of work, from posters, um, lettering posters, creating ads, doing displays. I got to do a lot of different things. But the thing that I remember the most, and during those years, my boss came to me one day and said, "How would you like to meet Norman Rockwell?" And I said, "Why?" He says, "He's going to be in town promoting his book, and it's going to be a very small group allowed in this small bookstore. But if you want to go, I'd be glad to take you there." And he did. I met Norman Rockwell. He was, without a doubt, one of my idols. I looked up to him. I think he didn't create paintings of people. He created um, people that were personalities. They had every person had a different personality. You could tell by looking at his picture, the way they dressed, the way they looked, the way they stood. And I think that impressed me the most, because he was able, anybody could take a picture of this happening, but he was creating a picture capturing the personality with a brush and paint. To me, that was awesome. I think that carried into my world when I started painting minerals, because I tried to do the same thing, as catch what I call the personality of the mineral. And I think that is one reason my paintings are a little bit different.
Yes, I see how that crosses over very much, like Rockwell definitely, like you're saying, captured that personality, but also sort of like this moment, like a singular moment in, like, it was just different. There was something to it, not like you're saying, not just a straight portrait. And that is what I see when I look at your mineral portraits too, is that personality, sort of that moment in time, almost like when it was just discovered or something. So very cool to hear that he's an inspiration.
The GIA bought quite a few of my paintings and prints and had them up on a wall. And years ago, when I first started doing Tucson, they bought them, most of them in the 3-year period. And they actually, this picture is going to come up later, but they took photographs of the hallway where they hung the pictures. And when you got off the elevator, there was a statement written on the wall by them, and pertaining to the way I captured my paint. And I think they said it very well. So I'll read it to you now. "These exquisite paintings represent the essence of a gem mineral's beauty, the very instant it is seen for the first time. Working in a mixed media of watercolor and opaque paints, Wilda captures a spontaneous moment and suspends it magnificently in time." And I guess I couldn't have said that better. Uh, that's exactly what I was trying to do, was my point of painting. Um, is to capture that moment of time rather than just painting a pretty picture.
And I think that's why people are so drawn to your artwork too, because it brings like an emotional feeling when you look at it. Very special to do as an artist.
And getting back to the what I painted back in those days, the winter scene that you see here was painted in '62, and this is how my work has changed over that period of time. Like all artists' work, gradually makes transitions from what you started with to where you are today. And this was a transition painting where I started a different style of painting. This is an actual scene in somewhere in Massachusetts. I used to go out with a camera and take pictures, or I draw pencil renderings on site and then paint them later. Oil paints, landscapes were my thing. For years, that's what I concentrated on. I continued studying, though, um, in museums. I didn't have a place to go, so whenever I went to a museum, I had the opportunity to study work that other artists did that I really, really appreciated their work. I really had a great respect for their work, given the fact that so long ago they did this work with pretty much what we today would call crude tools. They were able to do incredible landscapes, portraits, etc. So I would spend hours and hours in a museum studying their work. One individual in particular, Winslow Homer, um, stood out in my mind because of his technique, his style, how he captured that moment. And so he, for years, was one of my idols.
That's wonderful to hear. I love hearing about your inspirations. Tell us a little bit more about the commercial work you did. I see some paintings coming up where you did some like line work on vehicles and things. That is some major skill there. Tell us a bit about that.
When I was about 14 years old and discovered, by then I was ready to buy an automobile, even though I wasn't 16. And I was buying magazines that had articles about cars built by people out in California and other parts of the country, but California were kind of leaders. And I saw this pinstriping done, and I really, really liked what I saw. So I practiced for a while with brushes, and I didn't wasn't able to get the same feeling. So somebody suggested that I go to the paint and art store in Northampton, which was a little shop, sold paint, but they had art supplies. And I was very glad I did that and very lucky I did that because the person that ran that um, was an individual that during the Depression went to Detroit to get a job in the auto industry. And when he was in line, somebody said, "What are you planning to do when you get inside?" He said, "I don't know. Yeah, I'll do anything." He says, "Pick pinstriping." And he says, "What do you mean pinstriping?" He said, "Making thin lines on cars." He said, "Tell him that you can do that and I'll teach you when we get there."
Wow.
And he did. So he showed me the brush, and I have one here. I'll hold up to the screen. This is what the brush looks like I should have been using. This is
Oh, wow.
a sword striper. The hairs right now are dry. When they're
Mm-hmm.
wet, they come to a point, to a single hair, and you're able to draw thin lines, designs, curves, everything with this brush. Pinstriping has become over the years big part of my life.
Wow, I've always been impressed with that skill. I have a very shaky hand, and so when I watch people pinstripe, I'm like, wow, I don't think I could ever do that. It's so impressive. Takes a lot of deep breathing, I imagine, and patience.
The second job I had when I left the department store was Diamond Match Company in Springfield was advertising for artists. They needed some artists, so I took a job there where I learned quite a lot of different things about creating art for printing. However, one thing I was airbrush art, and I learned it there and brought it into the world of automobiles by creating paintings. The woman you see with the tiger is done on a trailer truck, and it's all sprayed by hand with a miniature spray gun. All the detail work, everything's done by hand.
Wow.
I was asked by many people to do things like this on the side of vehicles, especially truckers. Obviously, this picture really commanded some attention when people were passing the truck.
Sure
Horns,
does.
horns are blowing like crazy. The tailgate you see is a painting I did back in those days on the tailgate in one shot lettering paints, enamels. So that was done. All of this was done with a brush. There was no airbrush involved in here. A lot of detail, took a lot of time. It was a challenge, and I loved to do it. Did a lot of work. Did a lot of work on cars, custom cars, and creative cars back in those days. Even though I was working a full-time job, I could sometimes in a weekend make my salary in one day by doing this kind of work.
Wow. How neat, too.
I still stayed working. And then I took my next job at Chart Pack in Leeds. Um, they had a pressure sensitive tapes they made, and I did a lot of work there for advertising, catalogs, more airbrush work. And the airbrush work there was products that were in a blueprint stage. Many people can't understand what that looks like in reality. So my job was to take those blueprints and turn them into what looked like a finished product, all sprayed just like a photograph. And that was done with an airbrush. Some of the work I did was classified work for a company that had government contracts. Nobody could be in the room, even at home, when I was doing that type of work. So airbrush became very important as a fun thing and as a tool working at Chartpack. From there, I went to a company in Connecticut, Vision Studios. The clay that you're looking at is for Spalding Sports Company in Chicopee. We were asked to be one of the people to be able to have the opportunity to do Spalding's advertising for a year, along with a big agency out of New York, a couple of agencies in Connecticut and Springfield area, and then some other studios too. So we were one of them. What I decided to do, because Spalding was there when all of these sports were being shaped, baseball, everything, basketball. They supplied the products, and products a lot of times are first done in a state of models made out of clay. And so I used that clay early model approach to their advertising, and we ended up getting the entire account. It was the biggest account the company I worked for ever got in their life. And so we did a lot of work for Spalding for a couple of years. But two of the people that left there, one was the advertising salesperson that brought the account in the first place. The other one was the art director. I was a creative designer. So the three of us worked on the Spalding stuff. And when they left, I didn't stay much longer with the company I was with them. That was Concepts Incorporated. It was a small group. If there was only four of us working, most of the time we'd have an artist would come in once in a while, work for a while, but most of the time four of us did all the work, creative work. We had the Spalding account came with us. And so for years I did that. Even after I left Concepts and went into my own business, I still did tons of work for Spalding and big companies. So pretty much that commercial work was a big part of my life for quite a few years.
That's wonderful. I love the clay rendering. That seems tricky. I'm sure that's why they scooped you right up and they didn't want to ever let you go.
One of the nice things that happened in Concepts, the last place I worked before I left, was they asked us to, the Advertising Club of Greater Hartford asked us to design an award they called their Laurel Award. And when they did it, it was just a plaque with some laurel, brass laurel on it. But they wanted something that resembled an Oscar along those lines. So that ended up being my challenge. They asked me to work on this at home in my spare time because we were so busy at work. So I came up with a statue, and I used plasticine clay, which is a clay that doesn't harden. It doesn't dry. It hardens a little, but it never dries, to create this. And I'll show you what that looks like on the screen.
Oh, wow.
This was a Laurel Award, and she was completely hand-formed out of clay, spent a lot of time in my freezer to keep her from bending until we were able to get her cast. And what happened when we presented this to them, I won an award for the award.
That's the way to do it, Fred.
That was a great time for me and a very nice compliment. But it's the first time I ever did clay in this form rather than what I did for Spalding.
Now, for the Spalding one, is it like a flat piece and then you just kind of added the clay to bring out the 3D elements?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I did different clays for different, some of the different sports too. Tennis, I did one for tennis, a big one. And when I worked with a photographer, we used colored lights many times, different colors, to shine on this from different angles and create different looking um, arrangements. So everyone wasn't brown. Some of them were blue, some of them were more green, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up taking these. They were fairly large. They were probably 2 feet by 16 inches.
Oh
16
yeah,
by
that's big.
maybe a little bigger. Some of them were bigger, some were smaller. But they made coffee tables out of them, put a glass top, and used them in their lobby.
Oh, how cool.
But one of the things I did then too is I designed their lobby. So I was doing a lot of different work, and from big companies to the guy down the street that had a truck he wanted lettered for his business. Uh, and I think what happened, all these things that happened in my life were like a funnel when it came time for me to do mineral painting, because I knew how to draw straight lines and designs very thin. To me, I can do things that a lot of mineral artists probably have a difficult time doing, because I had all this experience doing all of these things before in different venues. Now they all funnel down to mineral world, and they all had an impression on me and helped me, guided me, I guess, in being able to do minerals.
Yeah, no doubt there. So tell us a little bit more about when you and when Helen, you also started collecting minerals and kind of becoming more consumed with the world of mineralogy.
Well, we started in 1995. We were planning to go to visit some friends, family actually, at the beach on the ocean. And I said to Helen, it was one of the first times we ever made a trip like this. And I said, how would you like to do something different? We could go to North Carolina. We could collect minerals at mines. She said, what do you mean minerals? I said, well, sapphires, etc. I had gone years before with my brother that studied geology. We camped in the mountains, Smoky Mountains, and went to some of the mines. But that never became a pursuit for me because I had so many other things going on in life. So at that point, collecting minerals wasn't an option. So she said, well, why not? We could stop for a while on our way. Well, we stopped for a whole day. And then she decided maybe we should stay overnight and maybe go in the morning one more time before we leave to go to the ocean. She found she found a beautiful ruby, had it made into earrings and a pendant, and that hooked both of us big time.
Yeah,
That was
it just takes the one time to get you.
had no idea that even existed. So it's an exciting trip, and we ended up going out the following year for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Decided to go collecting.
Couldn't wait to get back out there, huh?
No,
Well, there we went to North Carolina, and then we went to Arkansas for the quartz that was found there. And Helen was almost sitting on this one. I walked up behind her and I said, "Did you see that was next to her bag that she was putting stuff in, and she never saw it. She moved the bag, and there it was, buried in the dirt to some degree, but it turned out to be one of her favorite specimens she ever found."
What a find.
I turned into a very enthusiastic quartz collector.
I relate, Helen, very much. And it's funny, your story about like that being kind of where you were sitting and behind you. I always find my best specimens when I'm out digging, like where I'm sitting, or if I kind of like move a little bit, it's always like right beside me, not the direction I was looking in originally.
Well, it's funny. Fred said, "Oh," he bends down and says, "Look what I found." And I saw it, and I said, "Oh, no, I put that on the side."
Yeah, that's mine. I'm saving that for later. That's what you got to do. You got to keep on your toes at the claims.
That's right.
So, tell us, like, what are your? I'm assuming maybe Helen, quartz is one of your favorite minerals to collect. But yeah, what are your guys' favorite minerals to collect? What do you have most in your collection? And for Fred, I guess, what's your favorite mineral, if there's one, that you like to paint?
My favorite mineral to paint is usually the one that's in front of me when I'm painting.
That's
There's
good.
so many, there are so many different possibilities, and we had
Yeah.
so many different places that we collected that we were kind of overwhelmed. So I was always looking for the next painting to happen. But if I had to pick one, I would say that one of the places I liked the best was the Palermo Mines in North Groton, New Hampshire. Um, and so that would be my pick at that point in time as a favorite place to collect.
And what about you, Helen?
Oh, I would go anywhere where I could find quartz, Herkimer diamonds, and going back
Oh,
to Arkansas. And I was always happy being outside in nature. If we found something, fine. If we didn't, that's okay, you know. But I just really am attracted to the quartz, amethyst, and obviously the different varieties of quartz too. So it's just something I like to do, and I also like fossils.
oh
We'll
yeah.
explain more about that later.
Oh yes, definitely. Okay, well that leads us perfectly into my next question, which is for Fred. What was the first mineral specimen that you remember rendering, and what was the significance of that piece to you?
What happened to me is when it came to minerals, I had, at that point in time, I had two serious medical conditions that were happening. I had to give up a lot of my work that I was doing with thinners and paints. They didn't cause the problem, but they were irritating the problem. And so I had to do something different. Bob Whitmore, that owned the mine up in New Hampshire, suggested that I did watercolor paintings of minerals. And I said, like, who's going to buy them? And well, I would give it a try, and we can always find out. So Helen started pushing me into it. You got to do something. You got to do something. I think I was driving her crazy because I couldn't paint anymore. Uh,
Oh yeah, I bet.
that was an issue. So I tried quite a few, and when I finally I had some small specimens that I picked up at a show of the Utah topaz, and they were tiny clusters. They're nothing big. I couldn't afford anything too much bigger at the time, so I painted this one, and I liked the way it came out. I finally had something that I thought could work. I put it in a background in it, etc. And so that's the first painting that I ever did and made available to the public. It was the topaz from Utah. It's still one of my favorite to paint. Um, the next picture you're bringing up here is a specimen that I bought later that I painted that turned out to be one of my favorites, period. It was used in some of our advertising brochures that we did for Mineral Art. It was used in shows. This one actually was in a show in Munich last year for a special show they had on art and mineral artists. So there's quite a back. This one has quite a history already. It's still in my collection with the painting for the time being right now, but it's one of my favorite crystals to paint. I painted quite a few others for other people, quite a few.
It's beautiful, and actually, I'm fortunate that I was also an artist in that show, Fred. So we had art hanging in the same showcase in Munich last year, which is very special.
I think I remember seeing something on internet. Helen showed me that your work was there, and I thought that was really nice.
It was very special. I was very honored to be amongst all the amazing artists in that room. And that painting is gorgeous. Do you have prints of that topaz?
I still have some prints of those left. Yes.
Oh, good. I'm shopping, so I'm going to need more. Okay, let's see. What do we have next in our pictures? Oh, yes. So let's talk a little bit about your process and kind of how you start creating a work starting from sketch.
Well, all of my work starts with little thumbnail sketches first, rough sketches. This project was a later one now, just done not too long ago, within the last 2 years. Um, an individual came to me with two nuggets and asked me to do two paintings of these nuggets, and they were sizable. They're about 3 inches high, but they were from Australia, and wanted to know if I could do something with a background that represented Australia. And so I gave it some thought, did some sketches, came up with some ideas that I thought would work, showed them to him, and he loved the idea, the concept of what I was going to do with both paintings. One was facing right and one was facing left. They were two separate paintings. And the way I approach that is I take and decide what has to be done first. Most of the time when you're doing a painting like this, the background has to be done first. So I did some research on the outback and what it looked like and what was there. And once I went through all of this, I downloaded a lot of that information in my head. And then I started doing sketches on my own of what I would like to see in the picture. And occasionally I put in something that maybe a mountain or something that was in the background that was there and it was real. But I would create the background. I did all of this on tracing paper. The little sketches are done on drawing paper, but now I'm working actual size. Mm-hmm. And I work with tracing paper for the background and a different drawing I do for the nugget. The nugget was very complex, so I had to work little areas at a time to draw this thing. By doing it on tracing paper, you can move things around until you like the way they relate to each other. And then I transfer that image down to the watercolor paper. And from that point, I start painting the background. Here you see the background is pretty close to completed. There's a little bit more added later, but that's pretty close to completed. But I have used a liquid frisket and a frisket paper, or film rather, to block out the area of the nugget so we wouldn't get paint all over the place. It's difficult to paint big, broad, sweeping brush when you have something in the way there, and you can't do a watercolor by painting over it. If it was acrylics, I could get away with it maybe. But yeah. So I use this liquid frisket and the frisket material. Once everything is dry, good and dry, you take a rubber cement pickup, which you can either make out of some rubber cement that dried, or they actually make a pickup, and peel off everything. And now you're ready to work on the nugget. As you can see in the next picture, part of this nugget is done. I established the colors I'm using, in what order I put them, how I put them down, because I want the whole thing to have a uniform look. So I create a palette. And that palette's created for the entire drawing in mind, but I'm working on small areas at a time. Some of the detail, most of the detail, I should say, is painted with a brush. I didn't have to draw it in with pencil. Some of it was drawn in with pencil in between, the basic stuff, but everything else is finally, and I had the nuggets with me. I was able to use them for reference under a microscope. And you'll see the finished, that painting now is almost, and you see one little spot left. In the next picture, you have the completed painting. Now, I photographed 4 or 5 of my pictures this way. And actually the person that commissioned me to do this loved what I did here and asked me if I could make a copy for him. So he has a copy of that. He also has a copy of me doing the painting because he's going to leave this to his grandchildren, so both paintings someday. So every painting I go through this process. This one I showed especially because there were 2 things involved, the nugget and the background.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing about your process. And it's great to see your step-by-steps. If I owned one of your originals, I would definitely want that as well. Very special. Let's see. Is there, now I'm curious, it looks like you've done some other really cool projects coming up. Tell us a bit about this mineral wine collection.
A gentleman from Northern California came to me and asked if I would be willing to do a series of paintings of minerals that he had in his collection for his wine labels. He was going to name all of them, all of his wines after minerals. And it sounded like a real challenge. And it turned out to be an incredible project to work on. We completed 10 paintings, um, and they're now available. They have been for some time now, available to the public. And he since has moved to Idaho. There's still a very, very popular wine, especially with mineral people. Well, Helen was real happy with me getting this series because when we came to an agreement on price per painting. Part of the agreement was a case of wine with each painting
I think so.
of that particular wine. So we've had a pretty good supply of wine for quite a while.
Oh, I bet. So, how big were the original paintings for these?
Most of my paintings are done on a 16 by 20 format. That's
Hmm.
framed. So the image area is usually on a 11 by 17 piece of um, paper, archival paper.
Yeah.
And so that image would fit into a mat. And the reason I stick with a size like that is because of the people that buy multiple paintings. Like the fact that I frame them the same, basically the same, and they're the same size. I do
Yeah.
paint other sizes too. It's not like I do every painting that size, but that's the general size I work in because it fits well on a wall. It's not overbearing. It's not huge. It's affordable. A lot of reasons I work that size. Most of my images, though, are bigger than life in most cases. In the case of the wine labels, it isn't true with every one. They all vary somewhat. Some of them are actually life size, some of them are smaller, and some of them are bigger. Um,
Mm.
European style of painting is usually with no background um, and actual size in most cases. Um, that has changed to some degree, but many of the artists in Europe work with no backgrounds and actual size. And I decided to make this a little bigger. 16 by 20 size was something you could appreciate on the wall if you're sitting in a chair in a room. You don't have to walk up to it and look at the detail. Um, you could see nicely from when you're sitting.
Yeah, I do like that size. I'm looking at mine right now, my three collection, Fred Wilda collection, and yeah, from afar, like it's just mind blowing, and then it entices you to want to come closer and really stare at those details. And yeah, my partner was staring at your paintings and just kind of his mind was blowing as he was getting closer and looking at all the details. So, um, which I'd love to talk actually about this next, which is so detailed, must have taken you so long to get all those tiny little textures. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this was named after. Um, it's called Pyramite, and it's named after Frank Pyram, who was a legendary miner in Maine. Um, he has passed. He passed in 2023. But when I painted this picture, um, the mineral, when it was first found, was named for him. However, he had never himself found this mineral.
Hmm.
And I decided when I did the painting, two things. He was a very, very good friend. We just happened to hit up things off and became very good friends over the years. And I decided that I'm going to give the first print, frame it, and give it to him. So we presented that to him at a peg workshop in Maine way back quite a few years ago. And we have a picture there of the presentation. That's Frank there accepting the picture. And the story behind this goes that the next year we went back to the peg workshop, which was a yearly thing. It lasted for a week, and Saturdays was a big party and a dinner, and we would go there. We were invited to come up there to visit then. Frank came up to me the second year and said, "Fred, I never found a pyramide in my life until you handed me that picture." He says, "Look at what I found." And he had a box full of pyramide.
Wow.
And he was thrilled that he finally found some, and he was sure that the print had something to do with it.
I think so. It was good luck.
But at that point, because he was such a good friend, I asked him if he would sign the original, and he did. And I framed it. I told him I'm keeping it, um, and it's not going up for sale as long as we're both still alive. And I kept it for years. But the third year he came, but the second, I should say the second year he came back, he was even more excited because he was able to get into a prospect that had never been developed into a mine. He always wanted to see what was there, and it was an obsession with him. And he probably didn't know it. Obviously, he didn't know it. But the biggest pyramids he found in that prospect.
Oh, wow.
And you talk about being somebody that's so thrilled. He not only found pyramids, but he found gorgeous. Some of them went to a half inch.
Oh
And
my
he
gosh.
overshowed. When I got to that event, he came running up to the car and he says, "What are you doing now?" And I says, "I just parked the car. Why?" He says, "I got to show you what I found." And he showed me a box with thumbnails in it with all of these big crystals, clusters, like the big one that you see in the background there. A half-inch ball that big is huge for that mineral, really big. And I asked if he had any for sale because I'd like to have one that I could keep with the original painting. And he reached in, took one out, and handed me one. It wasn't a half inch, but it was sizable. And he says, "This is yours. Thank you."
Aw.
That's the kind of guy that Frank was. So when he passed in 23, we donated the painting to the main mineral museum, where they have a pier room there, and a lot of material that was collected by Frank, a lot of dedication to Frank there, and I figured the painting should be there.
Wow, what a great story. How exciting for him to find that prospect, too. Oh, yes. Look at that. Fred, tell us a bit about this. And I also want to know a little bit, since this one and the last one have really great expressive backgrounds. Can you tell us a little bit more just about your abstract backgrounds, how you incorporate those, and sort of what your inspiration was to sort of develop those with your mineral paintings?
Some paintings, I think, some minerals can stand on their own. However, this is a very special painting, a specimen of mine. Um, that Actually, I got the specimen in Munich, Germany, when we were asked to be invited to be the guest mineral artist of the year there. They built a huge display for me. We had a great show, and we got to see Munich. During that show, Helen says, "Why don't you take a walk and take a look around and just get out of the booth for a while?" So I did, and I happened to spot this specimen in sight with two or three others on a shelf, and there were people around it. I couldn't see it real close, but it was like calling to me, so to speak. And I left. I went back the next day and looked at it closer and thought about buying it and didn't. I said, well, went back and told Helen about it. She said, "If I were you, and you're so up on that, why don't you go and get it?" So I went back, and there were two guys standing in front of the booth. One guy had this in his hand,
Ah!
and they're talking about it, and my heart sank. I said, "Well, there goes my chance." And they
No.
can't, so I waited, and they talked, and finally he put it down and picked up the next one. The minute he did, my hand was like lightning speed. I grabbed that specimen, walked over to the dealer, and says, "What's the best you can do on this one?" He gave me a price. I bought it instantly.
Yeah.
This one I felt needed special attention because the background had something to do with that. Because that's the impression I got when I saw it. I could see the specimen and a lot of light and dark and things going on behind it, but I couldn't pick anything out in particular. So it was almost seemed to have an inner life, an inner glow, and was causing this sensation around them. And I wanted to, and it must have been what it looked like when the person actually mined this and took it out of the pocket for the first time. Probably had the same feeling that I was expressing. So that's why this was a special painting for me. And I decided to put the background in. Now, That being said, a lot of people ask me how I get the feeling into the personality of the picture. And I explained to them that I study the picture, I study the specimen or the picture if it's a photograph or groups of photographs for hours. A specimen, if I have it, it's under the microscope. It's under different lighting conditions. I pick it up and put it down and look at it. I get to know the specimen extremely, extremely well. I'm downloading this information not so much in my, as it turned out, I found out, not so much into my mind as into my subconscious mind. And it dawned on me one day, people ask me, when I paint, how do I get that feeling? How do I get that? And I said, I get into a feeling that I'm watching somebody else paint it. It isn't me painting. I'm not even conscious of mixing my paints. And I figured out why. Back in the 70s, so, when colored movies were out, CinemaScope was coming out, and everybody was going to the movies to see movies. There was suddenly a big spike in Coca-Cola sales and popcorn sales, and nobody could explain it. They didn't know what happened. All of a sudden, all these people that were going to movies for a while suddenly got this thirsty and this hungry. Well, a guy figured it out. A tape broke. One of the films broke, and he was repairing it. And it was at the beginning of maybe previews or something. It was towards the beginning of the tape. And what it was were individual photographs on the slide. One of Coca-Cola, nice cold glass of Coca-Cola, ice in it, beads of water running down the side. The next one was a while later, was a popcorn very close up. You can almost taste it. It looks so good. And these individual things were dropped into the film at intervals. And what was happening is people did not see it with their conscious mind. They only saw it with their subconscious mind, captured it and made them hungry and thirsty.
Oh
And
my goodness.
I realized one day that's what's happening when I'm studying the minerals, because I don't just paint from a picture or from a mineral. I study it extremely well, every detail about it. And I think that's what's happening, why the paintings come out the way they do. It's my subconscious mind painting as much as my conscious mind.
Tell us a little bit about the golden horn here. You have a really cool background, and I love the juxtaposition of the color in the gold specimen and then the black and white in the background. Tell us more about this one.
This happened in just recent times. The original painting I did of the gold horn was done in 2004, I believe. And that was when Harvard, they owned the specimen, and they were exhibitors in the East Coast show in West Springfield, Gem Mineral Fossil Show. And so Marty Zinn had asked me to paint it, or they selected the gold horn. They supplied me only with one photograph, and I guess I was fortunate to get that. So I did a painting then, which is similar to this, but it is different. And that painting, over time, was donated with a bunch of other paintings to the museum, New Mexico Tech Museum. So they had it in their collection. Recently, Harvard wanted to do some testing, I guess, and contacted the people there, the curator, John Rockavant, and he was supposed to do some testing of the gold horn and mentioned that he had the original there. They asked if they could get it, if Harvard would could get it back. They would like it in their collection, the original painting. And Marty Zinn agreed to that, commissioned me to do another one for New Mexico, and I was lucky I was there at the right time. John Rockavant happened to be visiting Marty, and we were visiting Marty, and we had a discussion about the painting. And I said, "Do you want it painted exactly the same?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Thank God, because I hate to do that." I said, "Can
Right.
you do something different?" And he says, "What do you recommend?" I says, "Doing some kind of a background." And he says, all of a sudden, he says, I got the perfect background. I have a photograph of the mine site where it was found. And when he sent me the photo, you couldn't ask for a better photo to fit what I wanted to do. I did a quick sketch, showed it to him, and he liked what he saw, and they loved the finished painting. That is now in the collection of New Mexico Tech
Wow.
Museum.
It's gorgeous. I love the detail of the trees and the mines. That's just amazing. It really is just the perfect backdrop for that golden horn. The golden horn just standing there, proud, commanding.
I didn't want to use a colored background here because we wanted the gold horn to stand out, but we wanted the representation of where it came from in the background, meaning it was found a long time ago, before color, so to speak. Marty had asked me early on if I would do the Tucson show, and it meant driving out because there's no way I could ship all my stuff, paintings and stuff. So we did go out, and we were there for a couple of years, and representative from GIA, Donna Durham, stopped at the booth. I was in the lobby of the Inn Suites, which was, you couldn't ask for a better spot. And she walked in and actually bought, I think it was one original and a couple of prints that year. And over the next 2 or 3 years, she kept adding to that. Every year she came in and bought some more. And one year, finally, she came in, and fourth or fifth year, and said, Fred, you need to see what we did. Stop over sometime, come to California and see what we did with your paintings. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. But I didn't have any plans to go out to California anytime soon because I had so many things going on. Well, I had the opportunity a few years later. We were invited to do some collecting at the Himalaya mine in San Diego County. And because we're in town, we contacted Donna Durham and said, we're going to be in town. We'd like to come and see what you did with the paintings. Well, it's harder to get into the GIA, I think, somebody like us that isn't a student or something, than it is to get into the Pentagon, I think. I can't believe what we had to go through. We had to have special security clearance and blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
All paperwork with us to get in. But when we got there and got in, they took us, she was tied up with a meeting, and one of her assistants started the tour off at least with us, and took us on the elevator. When the elevator went up to the second floor and opened, on the wall was a statement that I read earlier. And you can see in the middle picture, actually a couple of, all the pictures, I guess, the hallway's lined with my prints.
Wow.
The board of directors room has all of the originals. And that statement, we were so taken that Helen had a camera in her hand and never took a shot.
Oh.
We were just shocked at what they did and the way they and lettered the wall. We didn't expect anything like that. We did get pictures later. We called them up and said, "We apologize, but if anybody has a chance, we'd be glad to pay for the pictures." Obviously, they didn't charge us for them, and we did get pictures. Obviously, of what they did, hanging them up. So I put this case together when we were exhibitors in 2012. We'll get to that later.
Wow, what an achievement and what an honor for you.
Very much so.
That's amazing. Oh, yes. Okay, so really excited to hear more about this project. Tell us about your experience of illustrating the book, The Pegmatite Mines Known as Palermo by Robert Whitmore.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, Bob became a good friend and had been talking about doing a book for some time and was going to photograph a lot of these minerals that are micros that are found at the mine. But he didn't get to do that. He decided instead, after writing the history and doing a lot of research, that he's going to do a book and have me illustrate it rather than photographs, because I could select what I wanted to and gave a very close representation of what you look what the minerals look like with when someone doesn't have a microscope handy at the mine when they're looking for them.
Yeah.
And this is an index page, one of the pages in the index. The whole index, there's 130 different images, and they refer you to the page to go to. But the index is to be used by collectors there to help identify what they find. If they have a loop on them, and they look through the loop and they see something, they can come pretty close identifying it right on site. Sometimes you have to go back and look at it through a microscope, but many of them could be identified. The cover of the book is right here. This is the what the book looks like, and let me show you the inside. This is what the pages look like.
Oh, wow.
When you actually go to the page, you got more information about each specimen. The inside here is a representation, a pencil drawing of what the mine looked like in 1895.
Wow, that's so
The
cool.
building, all of the buildings are gone, but we had done a lot of research. The book itself, with everything that we had to do in it, from the line drawing, and pencil drawing, and the mineral drawings, took about 2.5 to 3 years. That part of it.
Wow.
It was an
I
awesome
bet.
experience for me to do, and the reviews on the book were overwhelming. People said that this has the first time this has been done in modern times. Years and years ago, people did this, but they didn't have 4-color process like we have now.
Right.
And so the book lives on, and kind of has a life of its own, I guess. So many people come back and they said, "Thank you for doing this way. I was able to identify minerals I never could identify before." So that was
That's
very sad.
amazing. Yeah, I was looking into the book itself, and I could not find it available anywhere online. And maybe I just need to keep digging deeper. But I was like, I want to get my hands on a copy of that book.
Most of the original books are sold out. I
Yeah.
have a few of the originals left, not very many.
Hmm.
Individual um, her grandfather actually owned the mine years ago. Came in and bought all of my good books that were signed by all three people that had something to do with it. And
Wow.
the people that own the mine now, Bob no longer owns it. He turned it over to, I think it's 5 people that were part of his crew. They took over the mine, and there was some books put together from an overrun of the original book that they have for sale. So you might be able to get them through the Palermo.
Out of the 130 illustrations, I imagine some of those were like the small index in illustrations and then larger versions, right, in the more detailed
No,
sections.
I did one painting, and it was used in different places. It was used in the
Okay,
index on the page.
I see. How many specimens are there at that mine? I mean, that seems impressive to have all of those different specimens you can find in one place.
I painted 130, but there's considerably more now. I don't know the exact number. They're pushing at least 140, maybe more. I was very fortunate to have been able to spend some time when they were mining. Bob would call me once in a while and say, "If you're not doing anything, you want to come up, we're doing a blast, and we have another tripholite pod." Tripholite is one of the minerals, when it breaks down, that creates the secondary minerals. And and that was happening a lot. There was a lot of tripholite pods there. And I was there when some of these were found. I handled them. In fact, I was separating the ones that I knew from the ones I didn't know, as Bob was putting them in different places. Anything I didn't know in his truck. Anything I did know went into another vehicle. And then some of them did turn out to be New World occurrences, and named after people that are good friends of mine and Bob's. Just recently, there were 3, I agree, 2 or 3. Just finished. I just finished 2, completed 2 drawings not too long ago, within the last 2 or 3 years of the latest ones. But there's still a possibility of finding more world occurrences there. So the number I don't know, the current number.
Forgive me, I don't know much about the mine itself, but are they always pretty much micro specimens?
Not all of them. Some of them are found as micro specimens. Some of them you can see. There's one called scorzolite. It's blue, very brilliant blue. And not only is it a great, I'm going to see it. I was looking. There, it's right there.
That's Vivianite.
Vivianite, scorzolite. Anyway, it also is found there in mass, mixed together with other, and not in crystal form. I'll show you.
Right. It's just in rough. Oh, wow.
That's
amazing.
That's what I'm talking about. It's not found in crystals like that very often, and those are very tiny. But
Yeah.
the material that is found in, it's usually an off-white. It's in feldspar or quartz. Depends. It can be in both. It can be used into jewelry, cut into jewelry, gorgeous jewelry. It's a great kind of material.
Let's switch gears just a little bit, and I want to hear a little more about your collaborations and friendship with Marty Zinn and what his influence was on your work.
The first time I met Marty Zinn was at an East Coast show. But the reason I got to meet him there is Laura Delano, who was a club member. We belonged to a Connecticut Valley Mineral Club, and she was a member. And when I started doing the paintings, she saw some of them. She said, wow. She said, you have more. So I had some prints made, small photo prints, copies. And she said, give me a set of these. There was 6 or 7, 8, 10 maybe, not very many. And would you like to get into the East Coast show? And I said, well, if I could. I said, I know there's a waiting list of maybe 40, 50 people. And she said, well, there is, and there's no room whatsoever. But let me show them to Marty anyway. She showed them to Marty. Marty said, I like his work. Find him a spot. So she did. It was between the men's room and the ladies' room on a wall. And I just had enough room to set up a background that I could hang paintings on with a couple tables in the front, some minerals and maybe some jewelry for sale that I was cutting, because cutting cabochon jewelry was one of my passions too. Anyway, Marty came in and saw the paintings hanging up, asked me to move a couple around, and said, I'll take those 4.
Oh.
Didn't look at anything. And he says, I was wrong. I said, I liked your work. He says, I love your work. I'm going to make you famous.
Yeah, and Marty.
Marty's a man of his word. He commissioned me for years after that to do paintings of minerals that advertised his shows. And sometime it was because he wanted particular minerals painted. As you see the picture coming up here, right there, rhodochrosites, those were Marty's rhodochrosites that I painted there. One of them is mine there somewhere, but the others are his. So Marty also gave me the opportunity to be an exhibitor, which is what you're looking at here, in 2012, to be the exhibitor at the East Coast show. I had 52 cases to fill. We were going to do Marty's minerals and Fred's paintings, but then I had a couple of ideas I sent him for cases that were different. And he finally said to me, the show is yours. Do anything you want. And so I showed him sketches. We borrowed a case from him that we were able to use for setup to take preliminary pictures of things in place. And the show was an incredible, incredible success. It drew people in more than one day, because a lot of people came to the show that come to the show for one day, came in and spent the day, another day, photographing all the minerals. And here's some people that some of these people were people that actually brought specimens, carried them on their lap from different parts of the country, Texas and Colorado. Steve, that worked for Collector's Edge, Brian Lees, has a extremely beautiful aquamarine, 2 crystals from Mount Antero on a specimen that's said to be one of the best, if not the best, aquamarine ever found in the country specimen. from an artistic aesthetic standpoint. And right, it's that one there.
Yeah.
Steve carried that on his lap from
Jeez.
Colorado all the way to here, put it in the case himself, and took it out and brought it back. Like him and some of the others, the Spans, brought a specimen. So it turned out to be an incredible show because a lot of people were involved. It wasn't just me. I have a lot of my minerals in there, but my collection isn't anywhere near what some of these other people had. But I already had paintings of their stuff. So they were happy to be in the show and part of that. So it was a show that involved a lot of people and not just my work, but it was an incredible success.
Wow. It looks like it. Those displays are so beautiful. Very colorful too. I like how you have them color coordinated. So, okay, so this Vivianite, we do need to hear about this. This is amazing, which is sort of linked to this question, which is, do you have a favorite mineral to render or a favorite painting that has stuck with you or been a turning point in your career?
I think this is probably the one that really changed my direction. When I saw this specimen, it was a Manette collection. Dawn Manette owned it, and her husband. They were exhibitors that this particular year. I think it was 2000. Not sure the year now. Anyway, he passed away and wasn't able to attend the show, take part in it, but she did have her minerals, the mineral collection there. And this is one of her mineral specimens. And when I saw it, I had to do a painting of it. We did not use this painting for the advertising show. We used a Legrandite. That was one of her favorites. I picked this from a series of photographs to paint, and I did it on my own. I also did a gold specimen besides. But what made this different, I tried different techniques and different styles and new things, and a different approach to it. Was similar to my paintings with backgrounds, only some of the detail was showing. And I wanted that because this mineral is very delicate. And for this, you can imagine what this must have looked like when somebody took it out of a pocket. Because
Oh, man.
it was so green, so translucent, almost transparent, blaze against this rough, rugged background. And how it was found, who opened the pocket, I don't know any details, but I could just imagine the feeling they got when they saw this thing in that pocket in perfect condition and no damage done to it whatsoever. So I try to recreate that to a point, not being there. I try to give you that impression, even though I'm not giving you all the details. And that was my motive. And that's where my painting started going more in years to come.
It's gorgeous. And I really feel that feeling of discovery. Okay, next we have this beautiful amethyst. Tell us about this one.
This is said to be the best amethyst from Guerrero, Mexico, of gem quality. They're absolutely gorgeous. When I saw this picture, when I was asked to paint this, they sent me a couple still pictures, and I asked if I could see the specimen from all sides. So with a cell phone in one hand and a specimen in the other, the owner turned it, kept moving it all the way around. I got to see the whole thing. And I got to study that as well as if I had the specimen. Obviously, there's no way I wanted the specimen in my possession.
Right? Too scary.
Yes, it would have been a disaster. And it would have been nice to work, but I was able to get that effect. And that's why I was able to capture what I did with this, is because I had that effect. And again, I downloaded this. You can't believe how much time I spent studying that thing moving and stock framed it at different locations so I could get a feeling of what every single crystal looked like in reality. And it's one of my favorite paintings. The person that owned this, he came to my booth. The painting was presented to him by Laura because it was used to advertise one of the shows. And he said to me, he said, I never had any appreciation for art before in my life. I had no use for it. He says, but what I have hanging in my living room right now is a poster of this that you did. And this painting is going next to it, and it's never leaving my possession.
Wow.
So to me, that was better than getting paid to do it. It was just overwhelming, the emotion he had.
Wow.
Saw that painting.
I mean, you changed his whole world right there, it sounds like.
Yes, yes.
That's a huge accomplishment for an artist, right?
Again, this is another example. It's a barite from South Dakota. One of the locations I love for beautiful barites. This is a Marty Zen specimen he asked me to paint. And it's, of all the ones I've seen all kinds of barites from South Dakota, obviously. And in my estimation, it was so perfect that nature created this the way it did, with the crystals, the way they sit in the matrix, the way it sits, is just overwhelming. There's nothing you can do to improve it. Nature did the perfect creation. I just interpreted it and captured it in paint. But it's an incredible specimen, one of my absolute favorites.
It's stunning. I'm a big barite fan. Oh wow, yeah. Tell us about this one. Look at that. Look at those details and that color coming out from under the gray. Ooh.
This is an acanthite. This is one of the last pictures I painted, recent pictures I painted. Both of them are for East Coast Show, this one and the next one. And we had two exhibitors they had two exhibitors this year. And rather than try to pick one mineral from both collections, decided to pick one from each collection. And that was a bit of a challenge to make it work. As it turned out well. I designed the magazine ad that and posters, etc., of this. But this specimen, again, I was working from photographs, several photos. I asked them both to please send me as many photos as possible from as many different angles, and did the drawing from using all of those photos. They both gave me videos too, so that made a big difference, as if I had the specimen here. And I can't say enough how you have to study these specimens and these photographs.
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
Was the other one that was with it, and we did. The advertising was done with both crystals, obviously, and this was an extreme challenge. The shadows, the highlights, I mean, on this are never white because it's a silver-based mineral. You're getting a silver highlight, a silverish highlight, a grayish silver highlight instead of white. There's no white highlights on this, and even when I mentioned this to a photographer, he says, you're right. You can't get a white highlight off that.
Wow.
Metallic look.
Yeah, that must have been challenging. I also find minerals that are all one color, can be very challenging because you're sitting there trying to find those real subtle differences and pop the highlights and not get the color off, by mixing. So that is a challenge.
One of the things that I have the ability of that helps a lot is I have a tendency, I can tell minor changes in color, hue, subtle, so subtle that most people don't see it. And I had that. I didn't realize it for years until talking with other artists and looking at pictures sometimes and saying, do you see the yellow in that, or do you see the silver? No, I don't. Well, I can see the subtle differences in color. So that's a great help in painting them. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, that is a gift. I have a ongoing argument with my partner about, oh, that's navy or black, or similar thing about that has a lot of green in it, and he's like, what are you talking about? So
you mentioned black. I never use black out of a tube when I'm painting. I make my black by mixing dark brown, Van Dyke brown usually, with indigo, which is a very dark blue. By mixing them together, you can get either a warm black or a cool black. by just changing the amount of paint you use when you go to thin it out. So I'm doing what nature does. There are black minerals. There's no doubt about it. But
Yeah.
I'm creating my own black because, like I said, I can get that warm look or the cool look by just changing slightly and get that effect.
That's genius too, because I mean, black out of a straight out of a tube or palette, it tends to be a little too harsh a lot of the
Yes,
times. So it's nice to bring
exactly.
those either cool or warm elements in it. It just grounds the black a bit more, and it just flows better into the mineral paintings. Let's see what's next. Oh yes, the woodchuck. I was loving this woodchuck so much, and he's surrounded by all the minerals, having the best time. Tell us about this.
Well, the woodchuck is very, very special. Um, and the way that came about, I was asked to do a painting for a magazine article on Eden Mills, Lowell, Vermont minerals, which are the garnets, the old asbestos quarry, very famous on the East Coast, not known too well maybe otherwise, but collectors found absolutely incredible, and I was one of very many that found incredible grossular garnets there, and a bunch of other minerals that were unique to this particular location. And so for years, you were able to go there collect. Federal government has closed it completely to collecting now. And the article was written about the mineralogy there. And while we were discussing, I was asked if I had any specimens from there that I would like to paint, and he could use in the article. And so yes, I do. I had a nice grossular, and I could paint that. And we were reminiscing and talking about um, collecting at the mine and great days we had and the minerals that were beautiful. And he said, well, there's no digging going on there anymore. And I said, yes, there is. And he says, you know somebody sneaking in? I says, no, the woodchucks. They're digging deeper and better and pulling out better stuff than we probably pulled out. Well,
Right? They're the professionals.
Yeah, we both had a good laugh. He walked away and called me a week later and said, could you do a picture of that woodchuck? Not knowing that
Right.
I'm a wildlife artist. And I did it. And it was used on T-shirts. I guess you could say that this is the second most famous woodchuck in the country now. The
Wow.
first one, obviously, is the one that they use for the shadow.
Oh, right.
But this guy came pretty close in the mineral world, at least, of being second place.
Well, he does look in charge in this photo or in this painting.
Yes.
He's running the mines now.
Yep.
All right. Oh, yes. Tell us about this beautiful agate. That is stunning. Look at
This is
that
an
light coming through.
agates happen to be my favorite mineral specimen to collect, and because I cut cabochon jewelry, and I have
Oh,
a
yeah.
special cut rough collection that I put together over 20 years. So this has special significance to me. This is an iris agate. Now, when you look at this agate in normal light, it's pretty drab. It's usually shades of brown, a little bit of orange, maybe a little bit of yellow, once in a while something else, but very, very blah. It comes alive when you put a light behind it, and you get the effect you get when you spray water in the direct sun and you get a rainbow. Well, rather than a rainbow, the light is diffracted and sent to you in so many different directions in such a way that you get all these colors, and which are not apparent otherwise. And you can even change that blue and make it by moving the light and changing it a bit. You can make more blue.
Wow.
It's dramatic. It doesn't happen with every agate. It's unique to some. And from what I've read, it's when quartz, the layers around that are creating this agate, the thin layers, they're alternating between quartz and agate, which is a microcrystalline form of quartz. And that, when the light hits the combination of those two, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible and as fast as possible
That's
and clear
okay.
as possible. You get this different light happening. Just like if you move the hose, it changes. That changes. So it's a special painting, um, and it's one of my favorites.
It's beautiful. And the colors are just mind blowing. Okay, this next question is for you, Helen. What works has Fred done that have stood out to you, and are there any favorites that are significant to you?
Well, it's hard to say or to pick out one favorite because he's done over 270 watercolors plus the Palermo book. But I have several that I do like. And this one here, because I am a quartz collector, I absolutely love. It also happens to be our logo on our business cards. And
I'll show you that. This is our card.
Oh, yes.
Now that's a painting, but we went to a show in Tucson, walked into a booth, and I walked right up to the booth, and that logo I just showed you, I found this cluster. I don't know if you can see it well there, but this cluster is almost a duplicate of that logo which I had created.
Oh, wow.
And when I walked in there, this was for sale, and I would have paid outrageous money for this. And the guy asked me how much. I asked him how much he wanted. He said $200, and I almost ripped my pants getting my wallet out because I was going to buy this no matter how much it cost because it's so much like our logo that Helen has
Wow.
it in her personal collection now because it is very close. It's not identical, but it's very, very close.
so he gifted that to me.
I gifted,
Wow.
Yeah.
this painting is gifted to her, and the specimen is hers.
So the painting, that was sort of out of your imagination in a way? Or like it wasn't
Yeah.
actually of a
Yes.
specimen? Wow. And then you found the specimen later.
Yeah.
That's
That
so
was-
cool.
That was
It was
crazy.
waiting for you. It was calling to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one is the Stegosaurus. I also like fossils. And when he attempted to do one, it took a lot of research because I would do all the computer work and we would research the environment that the Stegosaurus would be in and what he was eating. And the details, if you could see it from close up, are just stunning. I just couldn't believe that he actually painted this and the way it came out. But then again, he's always looking for that next challenge. So,
Right. Like I love the softness of the trees as you get further into the background. Oh wow, look at that. Every section, the texture of his skin is amazing.
Some people from Denver, from the State House, came into the booth in Tucson, saw this, and asked if they bought a print and asked if I could give permission for them to use it in their state book. Because
Wow.
their state fossil was a Stegosaurus, and they mentioned why they thought this made the most sense of the way I painted it, especially the paddles on its back were used probably for two things. One, to cool his body, possibly by standing him up in a damp, he could cool his body down, but also maybe because they were stood up during mating season to attract attention. And
Oh,
I've seen them
yeah.
I've seen them painted that way because I think they thought the blood vessels were maybe close to the surface and able to do that, like a turkey can do that with his head during mating season. But whenever I saw these painted, they were painted both sides red, and that didn't make any sense to me at all. If this thing's walking through the woods and doesn't want to get eaten by a T-Rex or something, you wouldn't want to be seen, so you'd put your paddles down and they would be the same color as the body. So those are the things that made sense to them too, I guess. So nobody will ever know for sure who's right.
Exactly, which is so cool to just even like think of that. They were probably very impressed with that. Okay, let's talk a bit about this root tile.
the root tile, it just amazed me with the complexity and the drawing involved to paint it. I think a lot had to do with all those years he did striping on vehicles.
Oh, yeah.
It just amazed me that if you see it up close, it's just absolutely stunning that he was able to get those intense.
I mean, getting a straight line is one of the hardest things ever as an artist. So doing that over and over and over again takes some skill, Fred.
Because of pinstriping, I was able to do it a lot easier.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, and I think people who don't do mineral art don't understand that you have to like hone in on these tiny areas of detail, and you got to work those before you can even move to another area, right? Otherwise, your brain will get jumbled, and you just won't be able to get it down the way you want it. So it's a
you're
patience
right.
game.
You're thinking about the picture in its entirety, but you're concentrating on details. But the details are part of the whole thing. So in
Yeah.
order for it to work right, you have to get everything right.
Yep. You got to slow down, not be in a rush. Now this painting is a challenge for detail right here. Tell us about this.
The purple appetites on that main tourmaline, they're just outstanding. And how Fred was able to capture the amazing beauty of nature's colors. It's always mind-boggling when he attempts to do another painting, and I look at him and say, "Are you serious?" You know. Um, but
You did it again?
yeah, he comes through. He really does. And I'm probably one of his worst critics. So he'll always run it by me when he's finished one, and I'll always say, "Oh, what's that?" Or
Right.
Say worst critics, I would say strictest critics.
Right. She's not afraid to tell you, what's going on. See something maybe you didn't see.
This painting was commissioned by the Maine Mineral Museum um, to do. It came from a mine in Maine in recent times. It's not ancient. And to find purple appetites is a big deal. To find tourmaline is a big deal. To find purple appetites growing like this on tourmaline is a huge deal. It's very rare.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. I think until I saw your painting and I was like, wait, what am I looking at here? This is crazy cool. I mean, and the colors are so juicy. Like it's just very bright. It wakes me up looking at this painting.
I had the opportunity to have these crystals in my hand when I painted them.
Oh wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So
So
there's I only picked out 4, but there's so many that we'd be here all day.
So, Fred, especially as a mineral artist myself, I specialize in pastel pencil. That's my main focus. But I've recently done some experiments with watercolor, started doing a few specimens in that medium. But I find it very challenging, and I know a lot of other artists find watercolor intimidating. Is there any advice you would give those artists, or anything that you learned along your journey when you switched over to watercolor?
Well, I found watercolors a bit intimidating from what everybody told me years ago. And I think I overcame when I decided to do watercolors of minerals. I had to do something and use watercolors. So I made up my mind that the paint wasn't going to intimidate me. The use of the paint, I was going to take control of the paint rather than being intimidated by it. And I think that I had mentioned this to an artist that came to me one day and asked how I learned to do watercolor so well. And I told her that same thing. Don't be intimidated by the paint. Take control of it and make it work for you. She came back a year later and she said, "Thank you, because it worked fantastic. I'm now doing watercolors I'm comfortable with." So I think that with any medium or anything you do, whether it's sculpture, paint, with oils, paint with watercolor, you're in control. You should never let your medium, your surroundings, or anything else take over that control. You need to keep control of your work and your ability to do that. If you do that, the self-confidence will follow and would be very apparent, and your work will be definitely better. That's my advice to artists. I have one other thing that we did do a while back, and I've done quite a few times here, but the Colorado School of Mines one time asked if I wouldn't come in for a weekend, if I was able to, when I was in town or whatever, and do a class for adults on a Friday night and students, young students, kids on Saturday. So we agreed to do it. We set up the whole thing. There was no charge from my side at all. They agreed to pay for any materials we needed. We came in on Friday night. We did the parents. Some of the parents thought I was going to do a presentation on painting, I think, and we're surprised to find out that they're going to be actually painting themselves. So we came up with an idea that would work, where they had to draw the mineral, which was a barrel, very easy to draw, six-sided. I showed them how to do that with simple method. Anyway, it worked great for the parents, but some of them overworked it a little bit. The next day with the kids, you talk about a second generation coming up, but there were quite a few kids that took this class, and they were anywhere from, most of them averaged 10, 11, 16, 20, not 20, below 20, anything below 20. And there were probably 20 kids. We're going to show you something else on this. Anyway, the kids the next day, there was one child had 3 or 4 siblings that were going to be in the program. He was 5 years old. So they said, he's too young. I don't think we should let him in. And so they asked me about him, and I said, let him in. What's the worst that can happen? If he disrupts something, we'll call the parents and say, please pick him up, or call in the parents. The kid had natural talent you would not believe. He listened to everything I said. He did the best painting out of the entire group.
Wow.
And the work came out stunning because he wasn't competing with everybody. He was following instructions and doing the best he could, which is what you should do when you're doing a painting. Don't look at what the guy's doing next to you.
Right.
Do your own painting. And that's
Show
what
no
he did.
fear.
And we've been finding that we go to a New England conference, which takes place in Maine every year and has been for quite a few years. There's a dealer's room. One wing of the hotel is for dealers. So after talks are done and everything in the evening, you get to visit with the dealers. We go there for the social part of that, not for selling. We have stuff for sale. We have to for a dealer. So we throw some things on the table and whatever.
Yeah.
But we're amazed that the younger people that came in spent their last dimes, so to speak, on prints. And even some of them are looking to get originals painted now. And you're talking young people that early 20s that really have an obsession with minerals. I think we're seeing a trend where more people are into the science, not just the aesthetics or the value of. I get very upset when we all only talk about value of minerals, monetary value, because there's values much greater than monetary. And anyway, so I think the second generation is there, alive, and they're very interested in mineral art. Not everyone, but a lot of them.
Yeah.
Helen's going to show you.
I'm going to just show you. This is a basic painting. I don't know if you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we decided we were going to go, I don't paint at all. I'm still doing, the stick figures and whatnot. And I said to Fred, if you're going to do this with kids, you got to make sure that you can explain it. So let's try me and let's see where we go with this and if I can follow your directions. And I was just flabbergasted that I painted this.
Oh, that's your painting, Helen. Wow.
She drew it and painted.
So what a great instructor Fred is. Look at that.
So this was just basically when the kids came, they were just drawing like 6 straight lines and then connecting them. They could paint them any color you wanted because they wanted right. Different colors. And it was just, I was surprised that it came out as well as it did. But I'm leaving the painting to Fred.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love that story.
So the kids can do it. And just get back to the main Mineral Conference, they also have a kids' day the day before the conference. They usually have it where the kids come in on buses, and they have a lot of displays set up and microscopes set up and different things that for the kids to do. They bring in huge boulders where the kids can hammer away and
Oh,
find some.
fun.
Yeah, so I'm really impressed with what they're doing up there with the younger kids. It's really important. They're our future.
Yep, that's so cool and inspiring. And speaking of the young people coming up today, what advice would you give, Fred, to up and coming mineral artists that might be coming out of the woodwork now?
Well, I would say stick with it. Um, don't worry about big sales in the beginning. Do the best work you can. The sales will come later. If you sell something, fine. And most people do it as a hobby and not. I guess the big difference was when we did it. We did it because it turned into my profession, not just a hobby. So we were out there doing shows, local shows, national shows, whatever. As many as we could and still paint too in between.
Yeah.
I think if nothing else, it's a great hobby. It can be a great hobby and it can be a great enjoyment to you as an individual, even if you don't want to sell your work, if you just want to do it as a hobby. Because there's so many different minerals, everyone's a different challenge. Obviously, you know that. And it's the variety, the colors, the forms, the transparency, everything is endless. You're never going to run out of material to paint. Everybody has painted a deer, a pheasant, a turkey, a tree, a house, a mountain, etc. But minerals, you could paint minerals that people have never seen before if you're in the right place with the right mineral. So they're extreme challenge and very satisfying once you complete a painting.
Yeah, agreed. And I said a while ago when I was sort of transitioning from doing portraits to minerals, when I started photographing minerals, and I was like, okay, minerals are the best models. Like you can get so many amazing different angles. They don't talk back, they're just the perfect model. Okay, I have another question for you, Helen. When did you start managing the business aspects and managing show organizing and print sales?
Well, we started out in 1996 collecting minerals as a hobby, and it quickly turned into a small business. And in 1997, we realized we were serious rock collectors and someone needed to get things organized. So, with both of us working full time jobs and Fred painting often, I jumped in and started to manage the business operations, the website, the ordering of supplies, keeping up with emails, correspondence, laying out the show booth for upcoming shows, whatever needed to be done. It took a lot of pressure off of Fred so he could continue painting and not worry about the business day-to-day events. So it was like we had two jobs going daily, but it's something I knew I could do the computer work and he could do the painting. So it was just a good match for both of us that it worked out the way it did.
We actually formed a partnership, an official partnership years ago. And so became a Helen and Fred business and not just Fred. She's a full partner in the Nature's Finest Creations, which is our business name.
And appropriately so, right? I mean, and it's great to have that teamwork because I know, like, man, what I would do to have somebody who helps me manage my website, all the online presence and stuff. I mean, it's hard to be an artist and be able to do all of that stuff as well. It takes away from your time to create, and it kind of, it can wear you down when you need to sort of store those creative juices for your artwork. So it's really wonderful to see you guys collaborate in that way.
So Fred doesn't really do computers. So if you're getting an email, you're going to get it from me. Of course, he's usually, but he always said, if I spend my time doing computer work, I'm never going to have time to paint.
Yeah, and he's right.
Yeah. So
he's figured that out.
That all being said, the final thing I think is that we have stopped doing shows. It was physically too demanding
Yeah.
for both of us to do. And especially at the East Coast show, we were in a situation there where we were right. I mean, we could have changed booths, but we were in this booth that was right next to the display area. If I had some young people come in and start putting up panels, and one of them said, oops, we would have wiped out millions of dollars worth of somebody's collection. That's right next to us. So we felt the best thing to do is we made it all these years without a bad accident happening, and we might as well end on a high note. It's too much work for us to do.
Yeah.
The nice thing that happened, we still have quite a lot of prints left in matted and unmatted. An individual from Colorado has approached us. We made a financial agreement. He is going to be now handling all of our prints, and both matted, unmatted, and framed, and on the website and in Colorado. They're still going to be available. Our website now is very short. It shows the type of work we do, a portfolio website, and we direct people to the new fellow that's taking over. We're looking forward to the new change. I think it's going to be beneficial to both him and to us, and to people that have supported us all these years, and we want to say thank you. But don't be afraid to go to the new location. He is especially pleasant person to work with, and is looking out for our benefit as much as he is his own, and maybe ours even more. So it's a win-win for all of us.
And one other bit of news is, this is exciting. Starting January 31st through February 15th, 2025, there'll be about 50 pieces of Fred's artwork at a retrospective exhibit, and this will be on display at the Mineral City Show in Tucson. A special thank you to Will Suits and Graham Sutton for planning this event.
It was their idea.
It was their idea, so we're really excited and we're happy to see that happening. So, and kind of ending, so even though we are done doing shows, Fred is still doing commissions and accepting commissions for, if you have that special mineral specimen you'd like a watercolor of, and they can always contact us by phone or through our website. And we want to thank both of you for
This
doing
opportunity.
this podcast. It's just been all the effort and time that you've put into it. We really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you, Fred and Helen. I mean, this has been such a joy. I'm getting a little emotional right now just because you're such a legend, and sorry. It's just, I look up to you, and your teamwork is inspiring to me. So thank you so much for taking the time and doing all the preparations for us and giving us beautiful images to share with our audience. And I'm just thrilled that I got to have a chat with you guys and learn more about your art career. And it's been inspiring and incredible to talk to you guys today. Thank you so much.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Mineral Art Maestros. A huge thank you to Fred and Helen for sharing their incredible journey, passion, and insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and tap the notification bell so that you're the first to know when a new episode drops. Want more mineral magic? Head over to mineralnation.com to explore, learn, and connect with the mineral community. Until next time, keep creating, collecting, and celebrating the wonders of the natural world. And thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Mineral Art Maestros. Bye-bye.